Now we turn to another important concept of cost. It's called differential cost or incremental cost. Sometimes we look at the cost of a plan or an alternative, an option. We look at the price, we say, it's very expensive. Do we want to do it? In fact, that may not be a good way to look at it, because when we are considering different alternatives, whether or not the cost is high, it's relative, meaning that if you have something in operation and there's a cost, if you change into a different plan or different alternative, then of course it will be cost associated with that. But whether or not the cost of the new alternative is high or low need to be compared with the existing solution's cost. So whenever we are comparing, we are looking at a cost and trying to argue whether or not it's a more viable solution, we need to compare it with the existing solution. The difference between these two will be the differential or the incremental cost. That is from the existing to the newer ones, or the cost of from existing to the newer ones, or the additional cost that the new ones is more than the existing ones. Okay, so we can take the difference and using the difference to do the evaluation. There's no point comparing two alternatives where their costs are identical. Those are not relevant. Sometimes these costs rack up to a very high level. Then you say, the new solution is very expensive. But if you take the common cost out, right, you look at the rest of the costs, the new one could be quite lower than the old one. But in any case, you still need to compare the difference and see whether there's an advantage of using the new one over the older one by examining their differences or differential cost or incremental cost. So let's look at an example here. Here we have two production methods. The existing one is plan 1. So there are some variable costs and there are also some fixed costs. And for plan 1, it comes to 392,000. For plan 2, you also see variable costs at the top, and you see some fixed costs in the lower part. And you add them together, they come to 387,000. If you do not look at plan 1, you look at plan 2. So 387,000. Wow, it's quite high. Do we really want to use it? But that could be a wrong question. The question is whether or not 387 is lower or higher than the cost of plan 1. So here we see the two numbers. We know that the total cost of plan 2 is less than the total cost of plan 1. But if we want to look at the differential cost, okay, we can, of course, we can subtract the total cost directly. So since the cost for plan 2 is lower than the cost for plan 1, so the subtraction will come to a minus value. We can also do it one by one. A variable cost, you subtract plan 2 from plan 1, and fixed cost, you subtract various fixed costs from plan 2 from those of plan 1. You come up with some values. You can see that there are some values which are 0. But in any case, you add them together, these 3 variable costs and 3 fixed costs, the result will come to the same conclusion. That is, the differential cost will be equal to minus 5,000. So the cost of plan 2 versus the cost of plan 1 is lower by 5,000, meaning that the incremental cost is minus. So it is more advantageous, or is more beneficial to choose plan 2 over plan 1, because the difference show that it's beneficial to adopt plan 2. Okay, so you can look at the value. If you look at the value by itself, it could be very big, it could be very small, but that will mislead our decision, because what we are really doing is we are trying to see whether or not the new plan is better than the old plan in terms of cost. So we want to look at the differential cost or the incremental cost. And in any case, when we are comparing two different plans, always remember that we don't need to compare the same the part with the same cost. We only want to look at the differences. Okay, later we'll see some cases on this issue. Sometimes we forgot that we want to look at the differences only, the differential part only. Otherwise, if we only see plan 2, we say, wow, that's a lot of money. But in fact, it's still lower than the cost of plan 1. Another way to look at this like trade-off issue will be this break-even analysis, which is probably quite common for most of the students. I think we probably have this this case in a few other classes already. But anyway, let's go through this exercise. Still, just think of, you have two options for making up certain quantity, certain volume of the product that you need to produce. One possibility is, hey, let's just take overtime. Okay, let's just take overtime to get it over with. So we have already set up the production, and we can continue to produce the product, but with overtime. But when we need to have overtime, the unit cost, or labor cost, will be higher. Right? Usually it's twice, probably twice the rate, or even three times the rate. So you can continue to produce it. You can omit the cost of reset out the production, but the unit cost for the production will be higher. On the other hand, you can say, okay, let's just stop it. Let's finish today. Tomorrow we'll redo it. We'll reset out the production, and we'll produce it during our regular shift. And during the rate of labor cost will be lower than overtime. So we can write out these two relationships. We continue to produce Q quantity, okay, at a higher labor cost per unit. It grows from 31.5 to 36. If we do it the second day or a second shift, we need to set it up. It could be on the same day. Right? Here we have production line, we continue to finish it. Or here, let's find another production line. Let's set it up and produce it. Okay. So that comes up to, we need to have this setup cost and ordinary or regular unit labor cost by the so we have these two. Okay, if we draw their cost line, you can see from the figure. The shorter line is the one with the overtime. As you can see, the increase will be from 0 to some value. It grows linearly as the number of quantity increase. The second curve, which is a longer line on this this diagram, it started from a non-zero point, which is 13,500. So there's a setup cost because we are using a second shift. We need to set up the production line before we can make the production. However, for the quantity that we produce, the unit cost, the variable cost, is only 31.5, which is lower than 36. So the slopes are different, and these two lines intersect at that point. And by solving the equation, we know that the intersection point is at the quantity of 3,000 units. So if we interpret this result, it's quite easy to see, because we want to have a lower cost, right? We want to have a lower cost. If we take the parts before the quantity of 3,000 units, you can clearly see that if we adopted the overtime strategy, choose option 1, the cost will always be lower than if we adopt second shift operation. However, when the quantity exceeds 3,000, you can see that option 2 now has lower cost than option 1. So the point of 3,000 is so-called the break-even point. Before or after the break-even point, the strategy or the choices will be different. Before, we will choose option 1. After, we will choose option 2. Okay, so finding out the break-even point is quite important, so that our decision of choosing which option depends on the quantity that we need to produce. Clearly, if it's greater than 3,000 units, we will take option 2. If it's smaller than 3,000 units, we will take option 1. And another example that helps us to understand this variable cost, fixed cost kind of interaction is this make or buy decision. It's very common in the company that we have the options of making some products ourselves or buying them outside, or we may need to have some machines that we can use, or some fixture that we need to use. These things we have capability to make them by ourselves, but there are costs associated, as you can see here. If you buy them, then there are costs associated. When you buy them, you can imagine that the fixed cost, okay, the fixed cost, some of the fixed costs could be the same, but the variable cost for making them, there are a lot of these variable costs. But buying them, there's only just one shot cost, or depending on how many you buy. Okay, so we can easily add them together, which come out to these two numbers. So clearly, in this particular example, buying will be more sensible than making it or making them ourselves. Again, if we look at differential costs individually, you can compute the option of buying over making, and if you add them together, you can see that the differential cost with buying over making is minus, which means that it costs less to buy the product. Okay. And for per unit cost saving, it will be $1. But again, if we will make more, as we saw previously, the result could be quite different. There's also this notion of opportunity cost. Opportunity cost, I think for most of the students who haven't had experiences working or haven't had experiences having some financial transaction, will probably have some difficulty understanding how realistic the opportunity cost is. Let's try. So sometimes we say, oh yeah, there's an opportunity cost, as if it's something that is superficial. It's just to remind us there's some cost there, but there's no cost really generated. So what does it mean by opportunity cost? The reality is, in the world, right, when you give up something or when you make some decision, chances are there's an opportunity cost there that you need to consider. So what does it mean by opportunity cost? Just look at the example there. You come to school to study for 4 years, okay, and you gain something, and after 4 years you go out to work, and you say, okay, so definitely this is a no loss decision because there's no cost. So after this I can make money, so it is all good. There's nothing bad about this decision. Although I think for a lot of people it is still a very sensible decision to come to university to study for 4 years to prepare oneself to be able to compete in the world. But realistically speaking, when we think of the investment in higher education, we still need to carefully compare with the opportunity cost. So the opportunity cost here is, during the 4 years, you will not be able to work. You will not be able to get your position and get promoted to a certain level. So although you gain a degree and you can start from a certain level after your graduation, but who knows, during these four years you could have been much better off and reaching a much better position, much better, even better than after your graduation, your starting position. So on the one hand, you get education, you may go longer and you will start at a higher position, but what you actually missed or did not get is the amount of money that you will get and the amount of opportunities or progress that you may have gotten for your career. So you give up something, whereas you gain something. The part that you gave up should be considered as your opportunity cost. So the decision problem is usually like this. You look at your opportunity cost, you look at your gain, right? One is cost, one is gain. You add them together. If your opportunity cost is higher than your gain, in fact, you may not want to take this new option because the opportunity cost is higher. The cost is higher than the gain. Okay, so it's probably not in Taiwan and not in a lot of countries. In the US, it was in the past considered as an investment for higher education. You go to higher education, you go through the process, you reach maturity, you have some knowledge and skill, you go out to work, you start from a much better position. But now, because the cost of higher education is so high in the US, and you may not even be able to recover the tuition, the cost that you spend in the education. So you add them together, you say, oh, I will gain something, but I will have this real cost, and this real cost I need to pay back over a very long period of time, and so on. So it becomes less attractive, at least in the US, to go to college to get 4 years of education. Okay, that's an example. It's just the same as I just described on the education system in Taiwan. Similarly, if you have a restaurant, you say, oh yeah, in this restaurant there's no labor cost because all the people working in the restaurants are my relative, my friends. I don't need to pay them. Or if it is a husband, wife, father, mother, and some children in restaurants, there's no cost. Right? There's no labor cost because all these labors are for free. I didn't really pay them salary per se. But it's not true. Because by working in a restaurant, they lost the opportunity of making money in other jobs. So the money that they did not get will be considered as a cost. So if their money that they did not get, or they omit to get, is much higher, then your opportunity cost is much higher. And even though you feel that you are making profit of your business because there's no labor cost, but it could be just the opposite. It may be better off that all other, your relative, your parents, your spouse, your kids go out to work, making a lot more money, and you hire people, paying them salary to run your business. So altogether, you can be more profitable. So the opportunity cost of this decision is these relatives of yours not being working outside and making the kind of money that could have made. Right? Those are the opportunity costs, and we need to consider those costs. Realistically consider those costs, because those costs does have impact. Those costs does represent the true cost of or in your assessment. There's also another cost which seems to be to some people confusing. I guess the key point here for some costs is costs that have already occurred, costs that you have already spent money covering. Is irrelevant to your decision now. You made a decision in the past. You have paid for that already. Doesn't matter what kind of decision you make right now. The cost cannot be recovered. So the cost is gone. But a lot of people, maybe including you, all of you, maybe in the past, or I think definitely I made a similar mistake in my life on not considering, considering some costs mistakenly. Okay. Sometimes we say, oh, wow, I just bought the car. Now you want me to do a certain things. Then the cost of the car, if I don't use the car, I'm losing the money. So I need to stick the option that includes the car. But that will be a wrong logic. Right? Here, buying the car, the cost on the car has gone. You have paid for it. You cannot recover it. and your other decision now were influenced by that previous decision, which you cannot recover, you cannot remedy at all. That will lead you to a wrong decision. So you may say, oh, because the car here, oh, I don't want to change a job, because if I change the job, then I don't have a car, and I wasted money buying the car, and I move to the new job, although it makes more money for me, but then here, but I'm losing the car. But you did not lose the car. You just, either decision you make, the cost on the car is the past. It shouldn't be included in your decision. Otherwise, if you add them together, okay, add them together, you will know that whichever decision you make, the cost of the car will be the same. The only difference is the decision that you make right now. Like whichever is better will be better. So previous slide said that there's an opportunity cost. You should not ignore opportunity cost, because it is something realistic, like economically, financially. If you really want to consider a rigorous financial analysis, opportunity cost is there. You have to consider it. Otherwise, you are making a wrong analysis. Similarly here, or just the opposite, here, sunk cost is something you shouldn't consider. Shouldn't let sunk cost influence your current decision or future decision, because it's gone. The consequence of that cost will be the same for whatever decision you are making right now for the future. So since it will not be different, then you shouldn't consider it. It's not the incremental part, it's the common part. You just want to compare the differential part or the incremental part, as between these two, which one provides better incentives. Finally, let's look at the last cost that we want to discuss, marginal cost. Marginal cost is usually measured by single unit. That is, as the number of the output, or the size of output continue to grow, and the average cost will be lower, but the additional unit cost bring into the system, usually lower than the average cost, will continue to drive the average cost lower. Well, the concept is like that, but there are also cases where this marginal cost idea or marginal cost concept can be understood quite easily. Let's just consider electricity rate, cost of electricity. When you are using a certain amount of electricity, the rate will be at certain level. As you continue to use the electricity, and the rate over different periods or different segments will continue to decrease, meaning that the marginal cost is getting lower and lower, which drives down the average cost. Okay, so marginal cost in this case, if you use more electricity, your average cost will also be lower, because the marginal cost is getting lower and continuously. So if you look at the figure here, the stairs is the decrease of the marginal cost from the left to the right. As you can see, is going downwards. Similarly, if you see the curve, the blue dotted curve, it represents the average cost. So average cost will be driven down by the decreasing marginal cost. Okay. So marginal cost basically represents the difference of the cost from the previous cost. Similarly, we can think of marginal contribution. So marginal cost represent, if we use it plainly, is increasing an additional units and the cost of increasing an additional unit. Similarly, marginal contribution will be the revenue or the contribution coming from increasing an additional units. So by increasing the number of units, we will be getting more contribution. Yet whether or not the unit contribution is getting larger or smaller will also required by our analysis. So in this particular case, marginal contribution equals the sales price minus variable cost. That gives us the marginal contribution, right? The fixed cost will be the same. Then if we want to find the break-even point, as we have shown previously, that is, we want to use the marginal contribution to cover the fixed cost. So by taking fixed cost divided by marginal contribution, we can easily find out at least we need to make a certain number of product before we can recover the total fixed cost, which will be the break-even point. And if we want to do marginal analysis, we have marginal contribution, we have marginal cost. At a certain point, if we look forward for an additional units that will produce, we'll have marginal contribution. But at the same time, for that additional units that will produce, there will be marginal cost. If the marginal revenue is greater than marginal cost, we have profit margin per unit. So if that is the case, it is worth of doing, right, for the additional item. And here there is an example of profit maximization. Basically, here we have a generic drug. If we make it over the course of a week, during the weekdays, including Saturday, if we made it, and for every case that we make, the marginal revenue will be 10. The marginal cost will be 7 per case. So we have marginal profit, which is $3 per case. But if we do it on Sunday, the marginal revenue will still be the same. It's 10. But marginal cost, because of overtime, will be a lot higher. It is 12 for Sunday. So the marginal profit becomes negative 2 per case. So from this analysis, you can clearly see that there's no point making this generic drug on Sunday, because then you will lose money. But if you think of the branded product, maybe it will be okay, because the profit, the marginal revenue is a lot higher. A marginal cost, even if it's 12, is still worth of doing. Anyway, if we come back to the generic drug, if you look at the figure, you can still see that if we see the total revenue, okay, the total revenue and the total cost. Although you can, if you make the product on Sunday, the total revenue will continue to grow. However, the marginal cost is a lot higher than marginal revenue for producing product on Sunday. If you see the blue line, you can see that on Sunday the cost increase. And if you see the blue area at the bottom of the figure, you can see that if we produce until Saturday, the total profit is at its highest point. If we continue to produce, the total profit start to decrease. So whether either we use the marginal cost, marginal analysis to show that it's not worthwhile for producing generic drugs on Sunday, or we can look at the total profit. We can also see that the total profit is at its peak on Saturday. If you continue to work on Sunday, the total profit will decrease. So these two analyses should come to the same conclusion. Okay. So again, marginal analysis tells us clearly that by making an additional unit of product, whether or not it's profitable. Here for the entire Sunday, for making an additional units of the product, we'll lose money. So by looking at the marginal analysis, we have already come to the conclusion that we shouldn't do it. But if we still want to find the total cost and total revenue and compute the total profit, you can also see that making the generic drug until Saturday is the most profitable decision. From this page 67 to page 72, I provided an example of a more complex case on uncertainty. So in order to look at this problem, we probably need more effort. So I guess I will leave this case here for your own reading. And if any of you have interest on understanding the core idea of this particular case, then we can discuss in the future.